I remember that occasionally at night, when we'd have a little bit of spare time, I'd actually just take the security chief, only him, and I'd say, let's go for a walk. And we had a big, huge compound, a couple miles, or many miles around actually, and we'd just go out walking, and I'd be thinking, frankly, and he'd be walking along with me. Sometimes we'd talk, sometimes we wouldn't. He'd been with me for quite a long time at that point and stayed with me and did the Iraq or the Afghanistan tour as well. And once I remember he said, hey sir, what's it like to be the commander of the surge in Iraq? And by this time it was succeeding. Everybody recognized it was succeeding. I think even those who were the surge critics conceded that levels of violence were down by 80% or whatever it was. There was a real prospect for conducting transition, for reducing our forces without the situation turning south again, and so forth. So it was sustainable progress at that time, at least. And he said, what's this like? I mean, how would you describe it? And I said, it's the most unbelievable, most extraordinary experience you can imagine on a good day. But there aren't many good days. A good day, in truth, was a day defined by no casualties, no serious wounds, no deaths. A day where there were elements of progress in various of the lines of effort, not just military, but the civil ones as well. A day where you were seeing demonstrable achievements. And again, in that kind of endeavor, there are very, very few good days. Well, leading an endeavor like the surge in Iraq in particular involved a considerable amount of pressure. You are overseeing an operation in which your forces, your host nation colleagues' forces, civilians are taking terrible casualties. And in my experience, that kind of bad news of those lost and seriously wounded doesn't get easier to take. In fact, I've said over time that there's a vessel. Each of us is a vessel. It has holes in the bottom, and bad news is poured in at the top. And the worst of the bad news is reports of casualties. And the bottom only drains so fast. And you have to keep your eye out for leaders, in fact, whose vessel may be overflowing. And a couple of times over those years, we had to move an entire unit or change individual leaders or staff officers. The pressure is enormous. The pressure, I don't know how to express it. There's one person at the end of the day who really is seen by everyone as being in charge. And that doesn't mean the ambassador is certainly not feeling those same pressures. But if it's a military operation at its heart, if security is the bedrock, the foundation for all other progress, it's the military commander, I think, that ends up feeling an extraordinary amount of responsibility and accountability. It can wear at an individual. It can, you can have sleepless nights. You can have nights where you won't sleep at all except with the aid of Ambien or some other or drug or what have you. This is tough. It's very, very hard, and I think you have to have a degree of resilience, of fortitude, internal fortitude, sheer determination. I took great strength, actually, from reading about General Grant during the Civil War. Someone gave me the book by Bruce Catton, Grant Takes Command, and I'm not trying to liken the job of command of multinational force in Iraq to that of leading the Union forces in the U.S. Civil War, but some of those pressures were the same. And Grant responded to those with enormous determination and fortitude and quiet confidence, disregarding even Sherman's objections to the campaign that he pursued at Vicksburg, which was so bold and audacious that others counseled against it, questioned it, where he hits Lee, finally, when he's moved to the east, and he writes to Lincoln and says, I intend to fight it out all summer on this line if that's what it takes. That is, and again, just extraordinary determination. And I think the individual in command of that kind of endeavor, or endeavor like I was privileged to lead in Iraq and indeed in Afghanistan, you've got to steel yourself for that. You've got to be ready for it. You have to be capable of handling it. You have to recognize the grinding experience that it is going to be, and you have to remain steadfast in the performance of it. There are some things you can do. We did try to fence time, a couple of days a week, for example, where I could actually go for a run with the members of the team. I did try to work out each morning before going in for the morning battlefield update and analysis, even though I might be reading the intelligence book from the night before as I was pedaling a stationary bike. So you're constantly multitasking. I'd try to read a few pages of Grant Takes Command or some other book before I fell asleep, often with the books falling to the floor. So you try to have some of that. But at the end of the day, this is a 7-day-a-week, 24-hour-a-day exercise. And the challenges of it should not be minimized. They can't be. And you have to be ready for that. You have to be equal to that. And you have to stay strong in the face of all the pressures that are brought to bear. You know, there's no greater privilege than leading America's sons and daughters, the sons and daughters of coalition countries, interacting with host nation forces. These are extraordinary privileges, extraordinary responsibilities. They add rocks to your rucksack, to be sure. I wrote more letters of condolence to those at home than probably any other commander over the years in Iraq. We had the toughest of the casualties during the years of the surge. And so this responsibility, this awareness of this great privilege is always in the back of your mind. And it is indeed yet another of the elements that produces some degree of pressure as you are discharging the awesome responsibility that is command, especially the awesome responsibility of command in combat. You know, there are people over the years that said Petraeus was lucky. He got a break here and there, and gosh, he gets thrust into this situation, and country's committed, and he's lucky and fortunate enough to be in that position. And there's a lot to that. Again, life is about luck and timing, about being at a key position at a key time. And, you know, there, but for a year or two this way or the other, someone else would have taken the call. There's a saying by a Roman philosopher that luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. And I'd like to think that I was prepared, that I had worked assiduously, hard, academically, militarily, physically, whatever it may be, over the years, to be ready if the call came. You know, there was a saying, Napoleon had that saying that every soldier has a marshal's baton in his field pack. And one time as a young lieutenant, I jokingly went out looking to buy a marshal's baton at Aldershot, as a matter of fact. We were there with the parachute regiment. And the man in the store said, well, geez, we're fresh out of those right now, but, you know, how about a swagger stick? And so I actually had a swagger stick. And it was a metaphorical image to me. I tied it to my rucksack frame, and I left it there for years. And every time I looked at it, I remembered that, you know, each of us needs to be ready when that call comes. And, you know, I really did devote decades to being prepared, to being as ready as I possibly could be, to having studied, practiced, examined, and so forth what might be necessary in a particularly difficult challenge. And I'd like to think that that hard work and study and work and so forth did indeed pay off to some degree at least when opportunity knocked and called for that preparation. That was luck, but it also was an awful lot of hard work and an extraordinary amount of preparation over the years. And so for those who are perhaps looking at this video, for those that metaphorically have that marshal's baton in their own rucksack, I say drive on. I encourage you. I push you, frankly, to do everything that you can in your studies, in your assignments, in all of your activities, many of which I hope will take you out of your intellectual comfort zone so that you too can be ready if opportunity comes your way.